My name is Claire Donnelly. I'm 41 years old, and for 14 years I was the woman nobody noticed until something went wrong. At 8:36 a.m. on a Wednesday, my new COO fired me in front of 74 employees during a product launch rehearsal. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't ask me to step outside. He just smiled into the microphone and said, "Claire's caution has cost this company enough." My hands were wrapped around a paper coffee cup, the lid bent under my thumb, and hot coffee leaked across my fingers. I remember that more clearly than his face. Not because it hurt, because I didn't move. I stood there in the second row, wearing a navy blazer I'd ironed at 5:10 that morning, and watched every person in that room decide whether they were brave enough to look at me. Most of them weren't. Before I continue, if this story connects with you, take a second to like and subscribe, and comment where you're watching from, because I promise you, someone in another city has survived a room just like that. Now let me take you back to where this really started. I worked for Meridian Biosystems, a mid-sized medical device company outside Portland. We made infusion pumps, surgical tubing, and the kind of boring hospital equipment nobody talks about unless it fails. My job title was Director of Compliance Review. What I really did was stop ambitious men from shipping dangerous products too early. That sounds dramatic. It wasn't. Most days, it was spreadsheets, vendor reports, safety logs, defect trends, and long meetings where people used the word innovation to mean please ignore the warnings. I had built our internal safety review system from scratch when I was 27. Back then, the company had 46 employees, a broken printer, and a founder named Helen Voss who believed one sentence like religion: "Nothing ships until the quietest person in the room understands it." Helen trusted me before anyone else did. She used to walk past my desk at 6:30 p.m., put a peppermint on my keyboard, and say, "Claire, if they ever try to rush you, make them put it in writing." So I did. For 14 years, I made people put everything in writing. Every vendor exception. Every skipped test. Every late-stage design change. Every executive override request. All of it went into a compliance archive that looked boring enough to be invisible and dangerous enough to end careers. After Helen retired, the company changed slowly at first. The glass walls went up. The mission posters got bigger. The new executives started saying speed to market, like it was a moral value. Then Marcus Vail arrived. He was 38, expensive-looking, and always smelled like cedar cologne and fresh Betrayal. He came from a consumer tech startup, where apparently, move fast was a personality. His first week, he held a leadership meeting and said, "Meridian has a culture of fear around risk." I said, "We make hospital equipment." He smiled at me like I had just confirmed his point. By week 3, he had renamed my department from Compliance Review to Assurance Enablement, which sounded less like safety and more like a yoga app. By week 5, my reports stopped going directly to the board safety committee. By week 7, I was no longer invited to launch planning meetings for our newest device, the V19 portable infusion pump. That was when my stomach started tightening every morning before work. Not fear. Recognition. The V19 was Marcus's crown jewel. Small, sleek, profitable, and already promised to 3 hospital networks before final stress testing was complete. I had reviewed the early vendor reports. One component bothered me. A pressure valve from a supplier called Northline Instruments. The failure rate was tiny on paper, 0.6%. Marcus called it acceptable. I called it a warning, because in medical devices, tiny numbers have human faces. On April 14th at 7:52 p.m., I emailed Marcus, Legal, Engineering, and Quality Assurance. Subject line, V19 Launch Hold Recommendation. I wrote, "Based on pressure inconsistency reports from Northline Valve Batch N442, I recommend a temporary launch hold pending secondary validation." Marcus replied 11 minutes later, "Claire, let's not create panic around theoretical risk." I saved the email. 2 days later, my access to the vendor dashboard changed. Not removed. That would have been obvious. Reduced. I could view summaries but not raw test logs. I could see approval status, but not the uploaded documents behind them. That was his first mistake. He thought I needed access to know what was happening. He forgot I had trained the people who still had access. On April 18th at 9:13 p.m., a junior engineer named Priya called me from her car. I could hear rain tapping against her windshield. She said, "Claire, I'm sorry. I don't know who else to call." I sat up in bed. She told me a second batch of Northline valves had failed under heat cycling. Not officially. Not in the dashboard anymore. The test was marked inconclusive and reassigned. Reassigned to who? I asked. She went quiet. Then she said, "To Marcus's launch acceleration team." That phrase made my skin go cold. Launch acceleration team meant 3 consultants, 2 analysts, and nobody legally responsible for product safety. I asked Priya to send me nothing from her company laptop. I told her not to forward, screenshot, or download anything. Then I said, "Write down what you saw. Date it, sign it, put it in an envelope. Bring it to me tomorrow." There was silence. Then she whispered, "Am I going to lose my job?" I looked at the clock. 9:17 p.m. I said, "Not alone." The next morning, I found a sealed envelope under my keyboard. Inside was 1 page. Priya's handwriting was small and uneven. She listed the batch number, the testing time, the failure conditions, and the name of the person who had ordered the reclassification. Marcus Vale. I put the paper in my bag and went to the ladies' room. I didn't cry. I just stood there under fluorescent light, listening to the hand dryer scream against the tile, and understood that Marcus was not just rushing a launch. He was building a paper trail, and I was supposed to be buried under it. The next week, the mood changed. People stopped sitting near me in meetings. Conversations paused when I entered the break room. My calendar filled with vague check-ins from HR. On April 25th, Marcus asked me to meet him in Conference Room C at 4 p.m. Conference Room C had no windows, just a white table, a screen, and chairs that made everyone look guilty. He was already inside when I arrived. "Claire," he said, "I want to be direct. Your resistance is becoming a pattern. My review is not resistance. It is when it blocks progress. It blocks liability." He laughed softly. That laugh told me everything. He slid a printed document across the table. A role adjustment. Effective immediately, my responsibilities would shift from approval authority to advisory support. Advisory support. 14 years of safety decisions reduced to a suggestion box. I read the second page twice. There was a signature line. Mine. I capped my pen and placed it on the table. "I'm not signing this." Marcus leaned back. "Then we'll have to document non-cooperation." I nodded. "Make sure you spell that correctly." He didn't like that. By May 2nd, my office had been reassigned to a product marketing manager named Elise, who kept a tiny fake cactus on the desk I had used for 9 years. My new desk was outside the supply room. No door, no privacy. A chair that tilted left. People walked past pretending not to notice, which is an art form in corporate America. At 11:44 a.m., an intern asked me where we kept printer labels. I told him 3rd shelf. He said, "Thanks." "Are you new?" I smiled. "Not exactly." That afternoon, I started building the file. I called it Quiet Room. Inside were emails, policy approvals, audit trail exports, meeting notes, vendor histories, and every memo Marcus had ignored. I also added one document he didn't know existed. The Helen Voss Safety Covenant. When Helen retired, she created a binding internal governance rule after a near-miss incident with an earlier product. It gave one-role emergency authority to trigger a board-level safety hold if executive interference compromised patient risk controls. That role was not the CEO, not the COO, not the board chair. It was the designated compliance officer, me. The authority could not be removed, reassigned, paused, or diluted without a formal board vote and written notice to regulatory counsel. Marcus had changed my title. He had moved my desk. He had humiliated me, but he had never removed my legal authority, because he hadn't read the covenant. Men like Marcus rarely read old documents. They assume anything old is weak. That was his second mistake. On May 10th, I received the invitation to the V19 launch rehearsal. I almost laughed. My name wasn't on the speaker list. I wasn't on the review panel, but I was invited as internal support. The rehearsal was held in the auditorium, with blue lights, a stage, 3 cameras, and a giant screen showing the V19 rotating in slow motion like it was a luxury car. Marcus loved theater. He stood on stage in a black turtleneck, because apparently every man who wants to be remembered by history starts by dressing like a warning label. He spoke for 12 minutes about boldness, agility, and breaking old barriers. Then the screen behind him froze. Just for a second. A technician panicked near the back. Marcus looked irritated. He hated anything he couldn't control. Then someone asked from the front row, "What about compliance sign-off?" It was a fair question. It came from an operations manager named Ben, who had 2 kids, a mortgage, and the cautious voice of someone who still believed procedures meant something. Marcus turned toward me. 74 employees turned with him. That was when he smiled. "Claire's caution has cost this company enough," he said. "Effective today, she will no longer be involved in the V19 launch review. We appreciate her past service, but Meridian is moving forward." The room went silent. Not shocked silent, coward silent. The kind where everyone knows something wrong happened, but nobody wants the wrong thing to notice them noticing. My fingers tightened around the coffee cup. The lid collapsed. Hot coffee ran over my knuckles. Marcus kept smiling. "Claire, HR will follow up with transition details." I looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then 5. Then 10. I said, "Thank you for putting that on record." His smile flickered. Just once. Then I walked out. Not quickly. Not dramatically. I walked past the stage, past the frozen product image, past 74 people pretending their shoes were fascinating. Outside the auditorium, Priya was standing near the vending machines. Her face was pale. She whispered, "I'm sorry." I said, "Don't be." Then I called Helen. She answered on the 4th ring. "Claire?" "Helen." I said, "I need to invoke the covenant." There was a pause. Then her voice changed. Not surprised. "Ready. What do you have?" "Enough," she exhaled. "Then don't go home yet." At 10:22 a.m., I drove to a law office 12 minutes from Meridian. Helen was already there, wearing a beige coat and holding a leather folder older than Marcus's career. With her was David Kim, Meridian's outside regulatory counsel. He had silver hair, rimless glasses, and the expression of a man who charged in 6-minute increments. We sat in a small conference room that smelled like toner and lemon polish. I opened Quiet Room. For 2 hours, we reviewed everything. Priya's statement, the hidden vendor reclassification, the email where Marcus dismissed the risk as theoretical, the meeting note where he removed me from approval review, the public rehearsal recording, which Ben had quietly sent me at 10:06 a.m. David listened without interrupting. At 12:31 p.m., he removed his glasses and said, "This is enough for an emergency hold." Helen looked at me. "Are you ready for what happens after?" I thought about my desk outside the supply room, the coffee burn across my fingers, the 74 silent faces. Then I thought about a nurse in some hospital trusting a pump because Meridian's name was printed on the side. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." David drafted the notice that afternoon. Emergency product safety hold. V19 portable infusion pump. Immediate suspension of launch authorization pending independent validation and board review. At the bottom was my name, Claire Donnelly, Designated Compliance Officer. Not advisory support, not internal support. Not past service, authority. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday at 8:30 a.m. Marcus didn't know, not yet. That weekend was strangely peaceful. I cleaned my kitchen. I watered the basil plant on my windowsill. I put aloe on the coffee burn and watched the red mark fade into a thin line. On Saturday night at 11:08, Marcus emailed me. Subject, transition conduct. "Claire, I understand this week was emotional. Please refrain from further disruption while we finalize your departure terms. Meridian will provide a generous separation package if you cooperate." I read it twice. Then I saved it to Quiet Room. I did not respond. That was something Helen had taught me too. Silence can be an answer. Monday morning, I arrived at Meridian at 8:12. I wore the navy blazer again. Same one from the rehearsal. Same one with a faint coffee mark on the cuff. I wanted Marcus to recognize it. The receptionist looked surprised to see me. "Ms. Donnelly?" I thought. "I know." She nodded and opened the security gate. The executive floor smelled like coffee and expensive carpet. People spoke in low voices, the way they do when trouble has reached the building before the official announcement. The boardroom doors were open. Inside, Marcus stood at the head of the table, laughing with the CEO, Caroline Shaw. She was newer than him and twice as cautious, which meant she survived by choosing silence at exactly the wrong moments. When Marcus saw me, his laugh stopped. "Claire," he said, "this meeting is closed." I held up the folder. "Not to me." David Kim stepped in behind me. Then Helen. The room shifted. Not loudly. Power rarely needs noise. Helen hadn't been inside Meridian in 18 months, but every original board member still straightened when she entered. Some people build companies. Some people decorate them. Helen had built this one. Marcus looked from her to David to me. For the first time since I had met him, he didn't have a sentence ready. The board chair, Martin Hale, cleared his throat. "Claire has submitted an emergency covenant notice. We're here to review it." Marcus laughed once, a dry, nervous sound. "With respect, that covenant is symbolic. It's legacy language." David placed a copy in front of him. "It is binding governance language." Marcus didn't touch it. Caroline finally spoke. "What exactly is the concern?" I opened Quiet Room. My hands were steady. "The concern is that the V-19 launch was advanced, despite unresolved pressure valve inconsistencies from Northline Batch N442 and follow-up Batch N449. Those failures were reclassified after executive intervention. My approval authority was then bypassed, and my removal from launch review was announced publicly before board review." Marcus leaned forward. "That is a dramatic interpretation." "No," I said. "It's a documented sequence." I placed the first email on the table. April 14th, 7:52 p.m. Launch hold recommendation. I placed Marcus's reply beside it. April 14th, 8:03 p.m. Let's not create panic around theoretical risk. The room stayed quiet. I placed Priya's signed statement next. Then the audit access log showing my permissions were reduced 2 days after my warning. Then the test summary showing batch N449, marked inconclusive, after failing under heat cycling. Then the vendor dashboard export from before the reclassification. Marcus pointed at the pages. That information was not authorized for distribution. Helen's voice cut across the table. Neither was a defective device. Nobody moved. That was the moment the room changed. Before that, they were evaluating me. After that, they were evaluating him. Caroline picked up the access log. "Marcus, why was Claire's dashboard access reduced?" He adjusted his cuff. "Because we were streamlining review responsibilities." Before removing her formally? "She was becoming obstructive," David said. "Obstructive is not a governance category." One board member coughed into his hand. Marcus's face tightened. "This is exactly the problem. Claire has always weaponized process. She slows decisions, creates fear, and then frames caution as virtue." I looked at him. "Marcus, did you or did you not instruct the launch team to reclassify the Northline valve failures?" "No." I slid another page forward. A Slack transcript. May 1st, 6:42 p.m. Marcus Vale. Move N449 out of critical path. Mark inconclusive and route through acceleration. Claire does not need to own this. Caroline closed her eyes. Just briefly. Marcus stared at the transcript. Then he said the sentence desperate people always say when documents enter the room. "That's out of context." I nodded. I brought the context. I placed the full thread beside it. 5 pages. No one touched the muffins in the center of the table. I almost felt bad for the muffins. Almost. At 9:06 a.m., David formally read the emergency hold notice into the record. Launch suspended. External validation required. Regulatory council notified. Board safety review triggered. Marcus sat very still. Then Martin, the board chair, turned to him. "Why wasn't this brought to the board?" Marcus looked at Caroline. Caroline looked down. That was another kind of silence. The kind that tells you alliances are only strong until liability arrives. Marcus tried one more time. "We were under pressure. The hospital contracts were time-sensitive. Everyone agreed we needed momentum." I said, "Everyone except the test data." He turned on me then, not physically. Worse, personally. "You've been waiting for this," he said. "You couldn't handle being replaced." I let the words sit there. 3 seconds. 5, 10. Then I said, "I handled being moved to a supply room desk. I handled being mocked in front of 74 employees. I handled being called emotional in emails you thought I wouldn't keep." I opened the last folder. What I won't handle is a patient being harmed because you needed applause by Q3. The room went still. Marcus's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Helen looked at Martin. Martin nodded. We'll move to executive session. David said. Claire remains present as designated compliance officer. Marcus pushed his chair back. This is absurd. Helen turned to him. No, Marcus. Absurd is thinking the woman who built the warning system wouldn't hear the alarm. That was the line that ended him. Not legally, not officially. But spiritually, yes. The board voted at 9:44 a.m. to uphold the safety hold. At 10:12, they voted to place Marcus on administrative leave pending investigation. At 10:19, his badge access was suspended. Security came quietly. No scene, no shouting. Just Derek from facilities, and a second guard by the door. Marcus stood, gathered his laptop, and looked at me with wet, furious eyes. You destroyed my career, I said. No, I documented it. He walked out carrying nothing but a laptop and the kind of pride that doesn't survive daylight. After he left, the room stayed silent for a long time. Then Priya knocked on the glass. She had been waiting outside with engineering. Caroline opened the door herself. Priya stepped in, trembling, and said, I can explain the heat cycle failures. No one interrupted her, not once. 3 weeks later, the independent validation confirmed the defect. The failure rate wasn't 0.6%. Under certain heat and pressure conditions, it rose to 3.8%. Still small on paper, still unacceptable in a hospital. The launch was delayed 4 months. Meridian lost 2 contracts, gained 1 lawsuit threat, and avoided what David called the kind of headline that never dies. Marcus resigned before the investigation finished. His consultant team disappeared from LinkedIn like smoke. Caroline sent me a formal apology by email. It was careful, legal, and bloodless. Helen sent me a handwritten note. Cream paper, blue ink. Quiet people are not weak. They are usually keeping the room alive. I framed it. Priya was promoted to senior quality engineer. Ben, the operations manager who sent me the rehearsal recording, now runs launch readiness. And me? The board created a new role. Chief Safety and Compliance Officer. Real authority, and direct board access. No one allowed to rename the department without a vote. My office is not large. I asked for that. It has 1 window, 2 chairs, and a small table where junior employees can sit without feeling like they're being interrogated. On the wall, I keep the original Helen Voss safety covenant. People think it's there as a symbol. It isn't. It's there as a warning. 6 months after Marcus left, I saw him at an industry conference in Denver. He was standing near the coffee station, wearing a gray suit, and talking too loudly to a man who clearly wanted to escape. He saw me. His face changed. For a second, I thought he might come over, apologize, accuse me, perform whatever version of dignity he had rehearsed. He didn't. He looked away first. I poured my coffee and walked past him without slowing down. That felt better than revenge. That felt like oxygen. So if you're watching this and you're the quiet person in the room, the one keeping records, asking questions, slowing down disasters nobody thanks you for preventing, listen to me. You are not difficult. You are not negative. You are not standing in the way. Sometimes you are the only thing between someone's ambition and someone else's pain. And if they call you emotional, document it. If they call you outdated, read the old agreements. If they move your desk, keep the key card. If they humiliate you in front of 74 people, let them speak clearly into the microphone. Because people like Marcus always think power is volume. They think leadership is speed. They think silence means surrender. But sometimes silence is just evidence gathering. My name is Claire Donnelly. I'm 41 years old. I was fired in public before a product launch. And 3 days later, I walked back in with the recall order. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me about the moment you stopped apologizing for protecting yourself. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. There are more stories like this. And somewhere, someone quiet needs to hear how they end.